So we find ourselves in Greece. And for what I'm about to say about Zeus, I'm not going as far as Crete. Crete is about 400 kilometers in that direction, in front of me. The thing is with Zeus, he cheated. He lied. He punished the innocent and rewarded wicked. Yet they called him king. He was the god of thunder, ego, excess, and absolute power. He ruled not with wisdom, but with fear. He seduced mortals and tormented rivals. He crushed rebellion with thunderbolts and chains. This wasn't justice. This was domination. This is Pantheon mythology, and this is the scumbag they called king. If you too want to seduce mortals, check out Pantheon Apparel, our clothing brand inspired by myths, folklore and legend. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Link in the description. Before he became the king of Olympus, Zeus was just another child in a long line of victims. His father Cronus had been warned that one of his children would overthrow him, so he did what any rational parent wouldn't do. He swallowed them whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, gone. But Rhea, their mother, had had enough. When Zeus was born, she hid him away in secret, swapping him for a stone wrapped in cloth. While Cronus swallowed a rock, Zeus grew up on the island of Crete, raised in hiding, destined to become the god who would challenge his father's brutal reign. When the time came, Zeus tricked Cronus into vomiting up his siblings and led them into an all-out war known as the Titanomachy. For 10 years, gods and titans clashed across the cosmos. It was only when Zeus freed the Cyclopes and the 100-handed Hecatonchires from Tartarus that the tide turned. With their help, Cronus was overthrown, the Titans were cast into the pit, and Zeus stood triumphant. He had done what no god had dared, broken the cycle of oppression. Or so it seemed. Because for all this talk of justice and freedom, Zeus didn't build a better world. He just claimed the throne for himself. And like Cronus before him, he ruled through domination, paranoia, and punishment. Was he shaped by the trauma of his father's cruelty? Did he mistake control for stability, fear for respect? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. Zeus didn't end the cycle. He perfected it. Zeus had won the war. Olympus was his. But victory didn't make him wise. It made him untouchable. With no titans left to fight and no father to fear, Zeus turned his thunderbolts on anyone who defied him. At first, the gods followed him. After all, he led them to victory. But over time, admiration gave way to resentment. He ruled not as a first among equals, but as a tyrant surrounded by subordinates. The sky belonged to him, the law belonged to him. Even Olympus itself began to feel more like a throne room than a shared dominion. Eventually, the cracks turned into a full-blown rebellion. Hera, his long-suffering wife, grew tired of his arrogance, his control, and above all, his humiliations. Together with Poseidon, Apollo, and others, she devised a plan. While Zeus slept, they stole his thunderbolt, bound him in chains, and left him helpless, a god, powerless in his own palace. For a moment it looked like Olympus might change, but power has a way of clawing back. The sea giant Briareus, loyal to Zeus, crept in and freed him. When Zeus rose, he didn't offer mercy. He made an example. Hera was strung from the heavens in golden chains, left suspended and screaming until the other gods begged for her release. The message was clear. Disobedience wouldn't be punished. It would be crushed. From that point on, no one truly challenged him again, not because they believed in him, but because they feared him. And fear became his greatest tool. Mortals who disobeyed him weren't corrected, they were obliterated. When Prometheus gave fire to humanity, Zeus didn't lecture him. He chained him to a rock and let an eagle rip him open over and over. When Sisyphus tricked death itself, Zeus didn't just drag him back to the underworld. He crushed him with eternal, meaningless struggle. The point wasn't justice, it was a message. I am untouchable, I am watching, and I will make you suffer. Even the gods weren't safe. Zeus's punishments were public, theatrical, and cruel. His justice wasn't about restoring balance, it was about reinforcing his dominance. In myths, Zeus is called the upholder of order. But what kind of order needs to be upheld with thunderbolts and chains? For all his titles, King of the gods, ruler of Olympus, Lord of the sky, there's one that ancient myths don't give Zeus. But perhaps they should have. Predator. His relationships weren't built on affection or consent, they were exercises in control. Mortals, nymphs, even goddesses, no one was beyond his reach, and almost no one could refuse him. When desire struck, Zeus didn't court, he transformed, deceived, or took. He became a swan to reach Leda, a bull to abduct Europa, golden rain to slip through the locked chamber of Danae. He disguised himself, manipulated the innocent, and left chaos behind. Io was turned into a cow to keep her hidden from Hera, robbed of her voice and freedom. Myth may frame these encounters as divine romance, but there's no mistaking what they really were. And from these acts came children: Perseus, Minos, Heracles, Helen of Troy, the cornerstones of Greek legend. But behind every one of their births is a woman who was pursued, deceived, or betrayed. The aftermath was no better. Zeus's victims were rarely left in peace. Io was driven to madness and exile. Semele was tricked into witnessing Zeus's true form and burned alive. Callisto, a follower of Artemis, was cast out and transformed into a bear. Their stories didn't end, they unraveled. While Zeus remained untouched, they were punished, disfigured, erased. Worse still, the mythology itself played along. His behavior was rarely condemned. Instead, it blame-shifted onto women, onto Hera, onto anyone but him. Hera, the one figure who resisted, was painted as vindictive and bitter. But how else do you respond to humiliation that never ends? It raises a deeper question. Was Zeus acting as gods were expected to, or was he simply too powerful to be held accountable? Ancient divine law wasn't human law, but even by those standards, Zeus crossed lines. He broke oaths, defiled sacred bonds, and left a trail of trauma. The myths didn't just ignore it, they elevated it. His power justified everything. He was the king. That was enough. Zeus ruled with thunder, but he held his grip through lies. He mastered deception, not only in lust, but in politics, diplomacy, and control. His oaths held weight only when aligned with his interests. When they didn't, he twisted the truth, shaped the rules, or rewrote the outcome entirely. This wasn't improvisation, it was strategy, a deliberate way to stay ahead, keep others uncertain, and preserve his authority. He styled himself as the god of order and justice, yet he broke promises as easily as he made them. That kind of duplicity didn't just damage individuals, it corrupted everything beneath him. On Olympus, mistrust became normal. Hera stopped accepting his apologies. Poseidon saw through his shifting loyalties. Even Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, knew better than to rely on him completely. Demeter, Hephaestus, Artemis, they played their roles, but none were true equals. How could they be, when Zeus reshaped the rules whenever it pleased him? He once swore to Aphrodite that he would protect her son, Aeneas, during the Trojan War, yet allowed him to be gravely wounded by Diomedes, only stepping in when Aphrodite herself intervened. He promised Thetis, mother of Achilles, that he would help her son gain glory. But his favour shifted depending on which side of the war he backed. Even Hera was tricked into aiding the birth of Heracles after Zeus manipulated the timeline of an oath, a betrayal that poisoned her view of the child forever. Mortals, meanwhile, clung to the idea that the gods were fair, that oaths mattered, that justice was real. But those who questioned Zeus's will, or stepped beyond what he allowed, were struck down not for being wrong, but for being in the way. Bellerophon, once favoured, fell out of grace and was left to wander, blind and alone. King Salmoneus tried to imitate Zeus's power and was obliterated in a flash of wrath, not for impiety, but for challenging the image Zeus held over mortals. This behaviour wasn't survival, it was control. Lies kept him above suspicion, beyond challenge, and untouchable. Deception is part of myth. Tricksters thrive, lies have their place. But when the ruler at the top becomes the least trustworthy of them all, the entire structure begins to rot. If the king can't be believed, what holds Olympus together? Zeus didn't simply stretch the truth, he weaponized it. And with every broken oath, every twisted promise, he chipped away at trust that once held gods and mortals in balance. Zeus was held as the god of law, justice, and order, the one who punished oath-breakers, upheld ancient customs, and kept the balance between gods and mortals. But the stories rarely question whether that justice was real or just a performance. He was called the protector of Xenia, the sacred bond between host and guest. He was said to defend oaths, strike down liars, and punish those who disrespected the old ways. But his judgment was anything but consistent. When Paris broke Xenia by abducting Helen, Zeus allowed war to unfold. When Lycaon served him human flesh to test his omniscience, Zeus annihilated his household and turned him into a wolf. Not out of mortal outrage, but because someone dared to mock him. When oaths were broken, the sentence was rarely measured. Tantalus served his son to the gods and was cursed with eternal hunger. Ixion tried to seduce Hera and was lashed to a flaming wheel. Prometheus gave fire to humanity and was chained to a rock, left to suffer for eternity. These were not just punishments, they were spectacles designed to terrify. And yet, in the myths, he remains the guardian of order, the enforcer of balance, the upholder of law. Maybe that's the biggest lie of all. Because if justice means punishment without consistency, if law means whatever the king decides, then what Zeus offered wasn't order. It was obedience, dressed as righteousness. For all his power, there was one moment when Olympus trembled, and Zeus with it. After the Titans were defeated and the cosmos divided, Earth herself struck back. Gaia, enraged by the fate of her children, gave birth to something no god had faced before. From the depths of fury came Typhon, a force created to tear Olympus from the sky. Typhon towered above the world, a walking cataclysm. His head scraped the stars, his wings turned day to darkness. Coiled serpents writhed from his limbs. Each of his many mouths spat fire, storm, or venom. Each cursed the gods in a different voice. Mountains crumbled under his steps. Oceans boiled in his presence. He was more than a monster. He was annihilation. When he rose to challenge Olympus, the gods did not prepare for battle. They fled. Poseidon vanished into the sea. Apollo escaped to the east. Hera and Demeter disappeared. Some gods transformed into animals and scattered. Only Zeus stood his ground. And he lost. Thunderbolts split the sky, but Typhon kept coming. The world shook as the two clashed. Storm against storm, fury against fire. In the end, Typhon overpowered Zeus, tore the sinews from his body, and sealed him away in a cave. The king of the gods lay broken, his weapon lost, his throne abandoned. It could have ended there, but it didn't. Hermes, ever cunning, and Pan, wild and fearless, crept into Typhon's domain. They recovered Zeus's sinews, restored his strength, and unleashed the storm once more. Reborn in fury, Zeus rose from his pit and hurled the heavens back into motion. The battle that followed cracked the foundations of the world. Mountains shattered, rivers changed course, fire met lightning, and sky met ruin. Eventually, Zeus prevailed. Typhon was struck down and cast beneath the earth, trapped under Mount Etna, or hurled into Tartarus, depending on the tale. It was the only time Zeus was truly brought low. But even then, he returned, and when he did, the storm that followed left no doubt about who ruled the world.
When Zeus took to the throne, he didn't bring peace. He left scars. The gods who served him carried resentment, mistrust, and fear. Mortals who defied him were cursed, transformed, or annihilated. From his violent encounters came children who shaped legend, heroes, kings, and monsters, but always in the shadow of coercion. Where other kings in myth were praised for justice or mercy, Zeus stood apart. Gilgamesh sought wisdom. Solomon ruled with judgment. Even Hades, cold and severe, kept to his realm and his rules. But Zeus demanded everything: obedience, loyalty, fear, and gave nothing back but thunder. Some may argue he was simply a god behaving as gods did. That morality is for mortals, not for immortals. But even among gods, Zeus was something else. More ruthless, more vindictive, more willing to destroy anyone who questioned him. He didn't lead, he ruled. Not by right, but by winning first, and never letting go. He was a protector, a punisher, and a tyrant. A god and a scumbag they called king.